And welcome to the latest installment of the Red Mountain Express podcast. I am Blake Westbrook, and joining me as always is Matthew Joyner. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to devote the entire show to our guest. So don't worry, we'll get back to Amazon, UAB, football, and other things in the Magic City news that you care about next week. Our guest on the show today is the Reverend Shannon Webster. Since 2007, Shannon has been the senior pastor at First Presbyterian Church. That's Birmingham's oldest church. They're located on 4th Avenue downtown. Along with his leadership at First Presbyterian, Shannon has been the leader on social justice issues such as payday lending. He also helped found Faith in Action Alabama, which is a multi-faith collaboration that inspires to achieve systematic change and create pathways of opportunities for citizens in Alabama. This Sunday, Shannon will be giving his final sermon as the pastor of First Presbyterian and will be retiring on October 31st. To give you some full disclosure, Matthew and I are both members of First Presbyterian Church, and we call Shannon a friend. But we're happy to have him on today. Shannon, thank you for being here.
It's good to be here. I'm glad to join you.
So start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, and kind of what led you to go into ministry.
Okay. I grew up in the northwest corner of New Mexico, the Four Corners area, they call it, and at the edge of the Navajo Nation. Probably in those days, a third of my graduating class was Navajo. It was an interesting place to grow up, a fun place to grow up. Grew up Presbyterian, unlike some other people, I never left the church, especially in those days of the late 60s and early 70s, where a lot of people, you went to college, it fell away. It was a given, sort of. I didn't. The church that I found in Albuquerque to go to when I was at UNM. There were a couple of really good churches within walking distance. One of them actually was the Disciples of Christ congregation that was not far from the dorms, and it was one of the places where it was safe to have conversations during the Vietnam War, when there were protests and turmoil, and most places were so polarized that it was not safe to have conversations, and the church was still a safe place to have conversation. And that was one of the reasons I had stayed in to do that. The other was that I had been an athlete in high school and ripped my knees loose and wasn't going to...
What sport were you
playing? It was swimming and track was my things, and but it was in swimming that I'd done that. And
I was going to tell you, swimming was nowhere on my radar when I asked you.
Yeah,
that's great.
So I wasn't going to be able to compete in college. I'd played trumpet, and I didn't want to be in the band. The UNM didn't want you if you weren't a music major, and I wasn't going to do that. And so all those things that, if you think back, high school for everyone, a brutal society, I think, and you had value by what you could do for somebody else, and if you could play a horn really well, or score a touchdown, or break a state record in the pool, and I couldn't do any of that anymore. But the church was interesting because you had value if you had mass and occupied space and walked in the door. That was different.
Absolutely.
So that's where I stayed there. I and found my way going to seminary there by some sort of odd compulsion, almost I guess you'd say I was a refugee from the peace movement. We started getting kids coming out to Albuquerque because it was one of the supposed hot spots of peace demonstrations, and they were coming out there with iron-on patches on their blue jeans, and it was pretty inauthentic by then. And I saw the peace movement as finally failing. Really, that's not why we left Vietnam, and so I was trying to make sense of stuff, and seminary was a place to do that.
Was joining the ministry always part of your plan, or did you have anything else in mind?
I was a journalism major, and I was writing advertising copy for an ad agency in Albuquerque, and I'm making some money doing that, and I had kind of planned to do that. And so seminary was and the ministry, it was a sidebar deal at the start. I wasn't sure I was going to stay in it.
after becoming an ordained minister, you did what most pastors do, moving around from church to church for the next few years, and then you became an executive presbyter in New Mexico, correct?
Correct.
So how long were you an executive presbyter?
19 years.
Yeah, so you were in a more of an executive administrative role for 19 years, and then you became the pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Birmingham. What called you to Birmingham and First Presbyterian? What was that process what was that process like?
It was sheer accident, actually, which is the way I've made most of the moves in my life. It's a sheer accident. Things happen and you go there. I was the executive presbyter. It's equivalent of a Methodist DS or a Lutheran bishop. It's that sort of position. It's administrative mostly, and I represented a region to the larger church. And we had a national meeting here in Birmingham. Every other year, the Presbyterian Church has their General Assembly in some city in the country, and people from all over the country attend and decisions made. And I wasn't looking for work. I had a job. I liked it. I was good at it. I stumbled across this congregation by accident. I'd worshipped here on a Sunday morning, not knowing that was there was, as we call it, a vacant pulpit there. And it wasn't until the next day, reading a form, that I'd seen that. And it was the best church vacancy form I'd ever read. I thought, there's not a church like that, not especially in Birmingham, was my thought. So I did a little investigation, and sure, everybody said, yeah, that's pretty much who they are. So I had an inner compulsion, I guess, to find out more about them. And so I managed to get myself in front of that search committee just to find out more about them. And I apologized to them at the outset, saying, I'm really not movable, but I just want to know more about you.
Just want to see, just in case.
And some of them said, why are we here then? So it was a reasonable question. I went. We had a good time. I went back home to New Mexico, and they talked to 150 more people, I guess, before they'd gotten through their stack of resumes. And then they called me and said, how serious were you that you're not movable? And I said, I don't know. And thought, what did I say? And next thing I know, my wife and I were down here interviewing, and we both the church and myself said to the presbytery, the regional governing body, it's a God thing. We got no other explanation for it, but that it's a God thing. It was as much of a sense of call as I have ever experienced was coming here.
Was there a shock from folks in New Mexico going, what? You're going where?
Yeah, that was, exactly. You're going where? Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham, people think about Birmingham, and they think the black and white TV reels from the 60s with dogs being put on people and stuff, and they have no idea. Birmingham was a big surprise to me too, but that was they were surprised about that. Now it's different out west. People here have said to me, "What did your friends back there say about you moving to the south?" I said, "Well, we don't think of it that way. It was like moving to the east, Birmingham, Baltimore, Boston, all those eastern cities. So we have a different kind of geographical perspective."
What about you mentioned, kind of, I guess, the region's view of Birmingham. What about yourself personally? Like, how did you feel about Birmingham, or did you have any kind of preconceived notions or ideas before you moved down here?
I would say all my preconceived notions were bad ones. They were ill-informed, and I was ignorant of Birmingham, as I think most people are. It's the best kept secret in the country. I'd seen the old black and white movie reels of dogs being put on people and nightsticks coming down on heads, and people like to show that. Of course, that's not Birmingham anymore, and hasn't been for a very long time. But it was more of a blank to me. Alabama and Birmingham all together. I don't know what I expected. It was just kind of a blank until I got here for that big meeting, and I thought, this place is beautiful. And the most progressive, socially active church here, I thought, who expected to find that in Birmingham? Well, now I know that's not illogical, but at the time, to me, it didn't compute with the kind of bad reputation southern cities have in other parts of the country. And I wish it were not so, but I had to shift, had a real shift in my attitudes and understandings. So, yeah.
Well, we're going to take a little break, and we'll when we come back, we'll have more of a conversation with Shannon. Beecham Woodworks is a locally owned and operated wood shop in Birmingham, Alabama, specializing in custom furniture and small home goods. Chris and Kanan Beecham create a wide variety of unique pieces of all sizes, ranging from cutting boards to farmhouse tables. Using wood sourced from Alabama sawmills, Beecham Woodworks creates affordable quality pieces that will be a one-of-a-kind fixture for your home. So support your local woodworker and visit redmountainexpress.com/woodworks or check them out on their Facebook and Instagram accounts. Beecham Woodworks, turning your house into a home. And we're back with our guest here on the Red Mountain Express, Shannon Webster, here, the pastor of First Presbyterian Church. Before the break, we were talking about you coming to Birmingham and what your kind of preconceived notions were. Has that changed more and more as you've lived here?
Yeah, it has. Birmingham grows on you, and I'm a Birmingham fan. I love this city, and I'm going to miss it in retirement when we move away. But this has been a wonderful place. And some of my friends back there are saying, well, what's Birmingham like? And I try to think, how do I give them a sense of what this is to dispel those prejudicial notions? And I say, it's the Austin of Alabama. That's the way I can describe Birmingham, I think.
What do you mean by that? I've never heard that before.
That's because I made it up. Birmingham has fabulous music going on all the time, all over town. We're halfway between Atlanta and New Orleans, and everybody stops here to play. And our local bands, our homegrown bands, are wonderful. We have fabulous music, and of course Austin does too. And UAB is a giant presence in the city for good, I think. I've heard the joke about UAB meaning the university that ate Birmingham, but there's some truth to that, I guess. But as the University of Texas is in Austin, of course, different sizes. But the intellectual presence of the university, that kind of dialogue that comes out of that, huge food culture. Some credit to Frank Stitt and all of his students, but great food culture, fabulous music, a wonderful art museum. I've lost count of how many repertory theaters we have here that go on, at least 7 last time I was looking. And that's this reservoir of culture and creativity and inclusion and openness, and let's be honest, a sea of a surrounding state that is not like that at all. And so there's some tension, of course, between Alabama and the cities in Alabama, as everybody knows. And Texas, same way.
Okay, I got you. And so you mentioned music and the presence of music in Birmingham. And knowing what I know about you, your history with music and how you've referenced music during some of your sermons, I think it's safe to say that music is important to you and plays a big part in your life.
I mean, you did 4 songs this past Sunday in the middle of your sermon. I mean, it was great.
Thanks. Unusual, but it was fun.
It was fun. I enjoyed it.
I also know that you've recorded 2 albums.
3 actually. 3? I did one in 1996 back in Canada.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Yeah,
right.
My brother lives up there.
What role would you say that music has played in your life?
I don't even know how to describe how huge that is. I'm kind of one of those guys where everything has a soundtrack where I'm going on, and all of it has a soundtrack, and I process things with music. Even I think music all the time. I have it on all the time. Of course, music's inseparable from the life of the church historically, going way back. But a lot of what I like is not so much I don't go around listening to religious music when I'm in the car. I listen to all kinds of music. I like Americana, folk, country. I played country music to get through seminary. That's how I made money for getting through school.
Did you play at bars?
I played at bars and taverns and coffee houses and stuff. I played in Chicago, near North Side.
How many pastors do you know that work their way through seminary playing at bars?
You would be surprised.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't think of any, except for you.
I know some, more than you might imagine. It's not that unusual. So got a soundtrack there, and for me, it's a lot of those songs, country western, honky tonk, and are as theological as your hymn book is. It's just that we don't think of it that way. Here's these tales of heartbreak and wreckage and redemption and derailment and resolution and hope and forgiveness, and all of that is in the music. It's in the music that people sing and the music people make that they never thought it would have religious connotations, but it does. Everywhere you go, there's theology, whether you know the word or not. I like to say it's the theology is the conversations we have at the street corner where God and human life and the world intersect. And the stories we tell on that corner, that's theology. And nobody tells stories like country music, and it's great theology. And so you listen to that and you say, okay, no religious figures named here, but where is God in the back of the room in this story? And God's always in the back of the room. I try it. One of the things I try and do is teach people to pay attention and listen to the lyrics, and listen to what's going on and what's transcendent about that. Where's something going on that's larger than we imagine at first hearing.
You said that you said this several times since I know I've been a member here, and I know that other people have heard it too, but you've said that Chris Christopherson is your favorite theologian.
Yeah.
Would you say that music has influenced your theology or vice versa? Or maybe a little bit of both?
Yes. It doesn't start with necessarily one or the other, but yeah. I mean, you start with the music and say, has that influenced my theology? Yeah, because I listen to stories in the music, and there's tales and there's positions in the music. And what does that mean if you start thinking theologically about it? I mean, of course, if you go the other way, you have the grand theological concepts of sin and wreckage and redemption and hope, and those are always in the music, and you recognize them when you hear them. So,
to change gears, you've been a resident here in Birmingham. You've helped lead the fight against payday lending in Birmingham. Why that particular issue over other issues? Not that other issues are not important, but that particular you have really led the fight on.
Yeah, there's a theme here. That was accident, kind of, again. I didn't know what payday lenders were. And we had one in our north side parking lot just across there on 5th Avenue North when I got here. And I thought, what is that about? So I learned a little bit about it. And so I dressed down one day and I walked in there to get a loan just to see what that meant. And then I started doing the math and figured out if I'd got that loan, I would be paying 456% interest. And I thought, that can't be right. So I had somebody check the figures for me. Sure enough, that's right. It's a business license to run a payday loan operation is a license to steal from people. It's a license to rob from people. And I've been standing up and saying that for years, and we have not won that fight yet. But it is amazing how many people get trapped in that cycle. And then I discovered we had a church member trapped in that cycle of debt and unable to escape. They don't want you to escape. You're supposed to be in debt forever. That's how they make the money. And they borrow each other's borrowers and just pass it around. And for people who are trying to do the right thing, I mean, that you don't get a payday loan unless you can give a post-dated check. So you have a check, you have a bank account, you have a job, or you wouldn't be getting a payday loan. But these are working people who are not making a lot, and when they're trying to do the right thing. They didn't borrow from their family. They didn't borrow from their church. They thought, I can get out of this. Well, it's very difficult to get out of. And so when I found that out, I became angry. And I found out some other people were angry, and I helped get a bunch of us in a room together, and we built this whole coalition, the Alliance for Responsible Lending in Alabama, ARLA, which is a very wide coalition. I think I'm probably the first person to ever get the Republican Women of Alabama and the Southern Poverty Law Center at the same microphone for the same issue ever. So it's a broad coalition of people who realize the injustice of this. And I get on my soapbox easy enough about it because if you want to look at it another way, from a business point of view, the Howard University did a study of the impact of payday lending and title lending on 5 southeastern states. They did that back in 2013, I think was when they finished that. We had like $327 million left the state of Alabama in 2013 that was not spent on tires, diapers, and hamburgers because of the fees and services and debt retirement, payday loans, payday lenders, most of whom are outside of the state of Alabama. This is money that left the state. And so there's just nothing good about it. And it didn't used to be this way before 2002. We didn't have such lenders in the state. We had usury laws. So,
staying on that same track, in 2015, President Barack Obama recognized you for your efforts in a speech to Lawson State Community College. And if we can, let's just take a listen to that.
One of the people who I met with was Reverend Shannon Webster of Birmingham's First Presbyterian Church. Where's Pastor? He's here somewhere. There he is in the back. Stand up so everybody can see you. So, Pastor Webster's one of the pastors leading the effort to protect consumers here in Alabama. And at a public hearing a few years ago, he explained why he decided to work on this issue. When our people are trapped in debt, he said they cannot escape, and we're all hurt. We're all hurt. And that's a simple statement, but it captures so much of what it means to be an American.
Talk about that moment, because I know y'all met with him at some point, and then I don't know if the speech was afterwards or before, but talk about that moment when he recognized you in the middle of that big speech that he was giving.
Yeah, the speech was after. There were 7 of us that would kind of narrowed that down. Actually, the White House had narrowed it down from about 40 names they had, that they wanted to learn about payday lending in Alabama and the issues that we had as they came here. And so I was the religious guy on the panel. The others did other things. We had stunning visit with a very, very intelligent and gracious man. And they had asked me earlier in the week about if they could use some of my words in the president's speech, which I found out had been when I testified in Washington before this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau a couple of years before. And so I was honored by that. Oh, okay, you can. So I was listening for that, and he didn't do that. He called me out and wanted me to stand up, and I was absolutely stunned, and I didn't think I could stand up, and so it was a little bit of a fog. I was surprised and humbled that he would do that. Afterwards, all the media folks came and found me because he got on a plane and left town, and
you were left here.
I was the only name they had. That's when I learned Andy Warhol was not quite right. He said everybody gets 15 minutes of fame if it's a slow news weekend, and you can get about 22 hours. That's what I figured it lasted. So,
wow. Did you mentioned was it ARLA? Is that
ARLA? Yeah.
Is that still a thing? Is that still an organization?
It is still a thing, and every year we have been working in Montgomery and lobbying and trying to talk to legislatures. We don't have money to throw around like the paid lobbyists do. The payday lenders have more money than God, so they got lobbyists all over down there dropping money. We're just dropping a moral argument that it's not right to do this to the working poor. And so that doesn't seem to bear much weight with a lot of Alabama legislators, I will say, because the level of corruption we've had with politics in this state that centers around money and who wants it, it's not surprising, I guess. But it would be nice if there were more people who were not for sale. So ARLA is still at it. It's still a broad-based organization of a lot of different organizations that have this kind of concern. We've worked to come up with some. It's not an alternative to payday lending exactly. We've got a Lighten Up Loans program through the Alabama Central Credit Union that helps rescue people who are rescuable, at least, and we have to do assessment to get them out of these loans, and we buy that loan out and rewrite them one that's affordable and payable. If somebody has 9 months to pay, they can do it. If it's a reasonable interest rate, like 17.5%, like we do at Lighten Up Loans, they can do that, But thanks to the Women's Fund, the Community Foundation of Birmingham, we were able to fund the startup of that loan program, so that's a good thing. But we do have that. But ARLA is going to be active, and it'll be active again in the next legislative session. If
people want more information on ARLA or want to get involved with ARLA, how can they do that?
I don't have a phone number or anything like that handy, but you go to arla.com and you'll find
ARLA.
ARLA, maybe .org. I have to look. Google it.
We'll post a link on the show notes.
Yeah.
Shannon, Sunday is your final sermon at First Presbyterian. Without giving anything away, what is going to be your message to the congregation?
Well, and I don't mind giving some things away. I've titled it, Everything is Holy. And in some ways, it's kind of tied to my own blue-collar background and to country music in some ways. We have made too much of a wall between the sacred and the profane, and by profane I don't mean profanity, but the sacred and the earthly, the fleshly, the mundane, the life we live every day, as if they were two different things. And that doesn't help anybody. It's more helpful to think and realize that the wall between the holy and the ordinary is as thin as gossamer, and the thin places where holiness seeps into everyday life, and that happens all the time, is what feeds us and makes us whole. There's in Jerusalem, there's a old church that goes back to I think it's like 3rd century church, still standing, that has bas-relief carvings of biblical scenes all around the sanctuary at about 3 feet high. One of those is Jacob's ladder. You may have seen a painting of Jacob's ladder that has this elongated ladder of the angels going up and down as Jacob woke from the had this vision while he's up on top of what he came to call Bethel. And here's foreshortened off as it disappears into the sky, and angels going up and down on it. That's a painting of it. In the 3rd century, on this bas relief, Jacob's ladder has 5 rungs, and that's it. That's all the distance between earth and heaven, is 5 rungs. So I think we need more short ladder theology and less long ladder theology that keeps God removed and away from our lives. And so it's going to be about that. It's going to be about that holiness is everywhere, and we just have to pay attention.
What's next for Shannon Webster after October 31st?
Well, I get a house fixed up on the market, and then we will move back to New Mexico. My wife and I built a house there in mountains in northern New Mexico. I mean, built it, most of it ourselves with our own hands. And and then I'm going to rest and read and fish and play some guitar. And write some music and rest up, and then we'll see. I have some skills that might be useful to somebody, some nonprofits who need a hand here or there, and I might get involved in that. There are people out there who are doing justice work who can't afford staff, who could use a good volunteer, or maybe I'll just repair guitars.
But first a nap, right?
But first a nap.
Shannon, thank you so much for, first of all, finding yourself here at First Presbyterian. Like you said, for yourself in your life, for me, several things in my life have been accidents, and I accidentally found myself here one day. Blake, of course, invited me and my wife, but I feel like that was all mostly an accident.
And we were at a bar.
But also thank you for being on the show and giving us time to talk to you about everything.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, and it's been good to be here. It's been good to be in Birmingham, been good to be at First Presbyterian. I remind them often they're the best starship in the fleet.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Red Mountain Express. Again, we'd like to thank our guest, Shannon Webster. And Shannon, this thank you goes far beyond this podcast. We wish him a fond farewell as he rides off into the sunset to the next chapter of his life. We're going to close out the show a little bit differently today with a song from Shannon's album, Silverbacks. His music can be found on iTunes and Spotify. We'll have some links on our show notes online. This one's called Stained Glass. It's one of our favorites, and we hope you enjoy it. For Matthew Joyner, I'm Blake Westbrook. This has been the Red Mountain Express. We'll see you next week.
Put the key in the master lock and listen to the tumblers fall. In the Sunday morning silence, a preacher walks down the hall. Light through the stained glass catches the eye, a crack that's been there all along. Maybe find someone to fix it this week, or maybe just leave it alone, 'cause it's all stained glass, ain't nothing clear. It's amazing how you think you hear the music when there's nobody here. It's all stained glass. Rose light paints the third pew on the left, where Helen sets a Jack up and died. She don't even want to be where he's ever been, and they used to sit the other side. Never made emergency, the doctors only shrugged. It's a fluke how he fell on a knife. But 28 years of violence and abuse are enough to last the rest of her life. And it's all stained glass, ain't nothing clear. It's amazing you can keep singing praises when you're living in fear. It's all stained glass. The chosen are not transparent. Everyone got got something to hide. And Jacob was a thief, and Moses was a killer, and David had a woman on the side. Peter had a mouth on him, Paul had a thorn, Mary had some kind of past. But raised and brazen, crazed and chastened, they all got their pictures in the glass. Looking at the bone-dry baptism font where half of these people were named. On a good day they witness for each other, on a bad one they turn it to shame. In an hour Michael put on the coffee, and Jane will put the bulletins out. And just enough time there to pick up the phone and call the man the preacher dreams about. It's all stained glass, ain't nothing clear. It's amazing you can keep singing praises when you're living in fear. And it's all stained glass.